this is day one of our High School Playbook series of webinars. And all week, we are going to be offering topics to directly support your favorite high school student. Tonight, we want to talk about a topic that affects all families, study habits. More and more, students are not only inundated with rigorous work, they're also inundated with all of this stuff that's out there, promising great results as long as, download an app, pay for a subscription, use a certain device. So that's what we're going to talk about here. This is studying smarter for better grades. We're going to be talking about motivation. We're going to be talking about apps, and we are really drilling down into strategies that work. So I see a question in our chat. Is this being recorded? It is being recorded. And I know that you're going to get a replay link for this. And this is a great time to also say, as Sarah and I have our conversation, put your questions in the chat. Don't wait till the end. We are going to do Q&A, but get your questions in there when you are thinking of them. So my name is Rachel Moss. I am an executive function coach and the instructional support specialist here with Educational Connections. And I am also a proud high school certified educator. I taught grades 9 through 12 for over 12 years. I know the rigors of the high school classroom, and I know the kinds of apps and tech tools that are out there that promise a lot but don't always deliver. I'm joined today by Sarah Remlinger. Sarah, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Sarah Remlinger, and I'm also an executive function coach, tutor, and instructional support specialist here at Educational Connections, as well as a certified K-12 educator with over 25 years of experience in the classroom. Most of that has been at the secondary level at private college preparatory settings where the rigor has been of the utmost priority. So I'm excited to be here tonight.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Sarah. So
Yes.
tonight, we're going to be discussing three key components. We're going to be talking tech-based strategies. We're going to be talking about things I think everybody has on their mind right now, like apps and tablets and everything labeled AI. We're going to be talking about the kind of like promises that we hear as folks who care about high school learners. But what we're really going to be talking about is what works, because there's a lot of stuff out there, but we have to know what kind of study strategies are really going to work. And so we have to start with fundamentals for strong students. So these are the three areas of fundamentals that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about reading strategies to help students retain information. We're going to be talking about organized writing for any subject. And we're going to talk about ways to review that reduce frustration. So this is really like any any sort of subject that kids are in. And so I think, Sarah, we should just get right into it with our first strategy. So
Okay.
the first one we're going to talk about is annotating to retain more information. And I know, Sarah, that you're an ELA teacher. Would you talk to us a little bit about like annotating when students are reading?
Yes, and actually, this kind of goes beyond the ELA classroom. In fact, this
Mhm.
covers all core subjects. Kind of the old way that students would approach text is just literally let their eyes roam over it or just start reading without having any real purpose for reading. And so then, of course, the eyes glaze, they don't know what they read, they're frustrated, anxiety sets in more so than what they already deal with being a student in this day and age. And so, we've found that annotation, which truly is just a conversation with text. So,
Yeah,
that friend that you're at the movies with, and that they're just constantly having a conversation with the movie. It's the exact same thing
that's
with the
me.
text. Is that you? Are you that person?
Yeah, and in my family, my mom and I would always do this, and now my husband's the same way. We often have to like pause the movie, or now with like, Apple TV and stuff, you can just pause the thing because we have things to say.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
I'm a literature teacher. I taught AP Lit, AP, it was called expository composition some years ago. I think the one that they have now is AP Seminar. And so what I noticed is just what you're saying, Sarah, that Students have these reading tasks,
Mhm.
but they don't have strategies to read. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, read the thing.
Mhm.
So, annotation, it takes some tools and it takes some questions. And so, even if you look at our little picture here, we have our little hoodied student diligently reading. It takes the text and also something to have the conversation with. So,
Mhm.
you need that book, and then you need like a pencil or a pen, and then post-its or
Mhm.
highlighters. And we have these three questions up on the board. Because if you're having that conversation, now you can be like me, yelling at the TV, but we want the conversation to be productive. So
Mhm.
this it doesn't matter what your favorite student is reading. These three questions really help. Like, what is the author trying to teach me? Do I agree or disagree with the author's ideas and why? And what does this remind me of from other things that I've learned? Sarah, can you talk to us a little bit about the motivating factor here? Because reading sometimes is very demotivating for students. How can this help with motivation for these types of tasks in high school?
Well, what I've seen working with students is it really first off it cuts down the task time because they're not rereading things. So again, setting that purpose
Yeah.
with reading and then really connecting with the text on some level. So we teach students to ask questions of the text. Well, they become their questions. Of course, if a teacher or whatever an instructor has some pre-made questions or there's questions at the end of the chapter, we're always teaching them, let's look at the questions first. Again, setting that purpose for reading. And so they're kind of honing in on that. So it really becomes not just a task, but there's like a motivation piece to it because it's their questions that they are developing and they're asking. Now, Rachel, you and I both know that takes a little time to kind of
Hmm.
get them started and to get them trained in it. So I also just want to kind of, just put the expectations out there. It's not something that happens overnight. Like this is a
Yeah.
building process that we teach students over time, little chunking it because it's hard at first. Just like when we learn a new skill of any kind and we do something for the first time, it takes a little bit longer. But once they become skilled at it, their reading task actually goes by faster. Again, upping that motivation to kind of, getting that done quicker and more effective. And so they're really able to retain things. And then, then like you were talking about getting the pencil and actually doing some actual writing and opening those brain pathways for connection rather than just reading, we've opened up a number of pathways to be able to really connect with the text.
Yeah. I want to actually address a question that we have right now in the chat from Myra, who
Mhm.
asks, does this work with a history text?
Yes.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah. So this is something that you use, and a lot of times teachers, I know that I do this with my students. I talk about it in terms of have a conversation with the text.
Mhm.
Another reason that this can really help with things like history, science textbooks. I mean, golly, if you're taking an AP class and you have to read like theories about mathematics and then write about it on your own, it helps with that.
Yes.
The other thing that this is really good for is if you're asking questions of the text, you can also then create your own questions.
Mhm.
So many times students, they will read something, they'll come into the classroom and then not be able to find like, oh, there was something I wanted to ask my teacher. This is a
Mhm.
way for them to navigate the text. The other thing this does in terms of motivation, so much of motivation is self-efficacy
Mhm.
or the way that we view ourselves in tasks. If you have
Mhm.
a student who thinks of, I know I've heard this from so many high schoolers. Do you ever hear like Sarah, like, oh, I'm just a bad reader. That's
Mhm.
why,
All the
yeah.
time.
So you are a quote unquote bad reader if you maybe don't have a strategy, or if,
Mhm.
I mean, I remember times in my classroom, every year I would give my students great expectations. That is 500 pages of intimidation.
Yes.
If you don't have a strategy, you're looking at that and you're thinking of yourself in failing terms.
Mhm.
So this really helps motivation because it allows students to have a way to move through the text.
Mhm.
And also, in our webinar today, we're talking about not only, these great strategies, but also like technology.
Mhm.
Because goodness knows, as educators and parents, we're getting inundated with this stuff. So would you talk to us a little bit about our tech assist for
Yes.
this one?
Yes. So, especially the annotation, like we have down here, the notability and good notes. So that is really kind of replicating and putting it all into one place as far as, those handwritten notes, but also keeping to the importance of there is something in the research backs it up that there's something in the writing of the notes versus just typing them out.
Yeah.
So what's really nice is we've kind of combined all of the things together. And then of course, what's great is a lot of these texts can be put onto Notability or Good Notes, and then they can annotate right on the text.
Mhm.
We kind of bypass all the sticky notes, all the highlighters, and having to gather all the things. And then, we have those things. And so we're opening up all those pathways that are so great to connection and learning that we go beyond just typing. So, but again, we're using that tech piece with it.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, what I love about the tech assist that we're talking today, we're not talking about like, oh, download this app
Yeah.
and it's going to do a thing for you. It's
Mhm.
a tool that's going to help you. This is a metaphor I always use with my students. When they talk about text, I actually talk about another form of technology, the good old mixer. You know, it doesn't bake the cake for
Right.
you, but
Right.
darn it, it can make steps a lot easier.
Yeah.
Once you have the skills, now you can do things that are more complex. So once we build that skill set, the annotation skill set, we can put in a tech assist. And now a student who's already doing this great strategy, they can get even more out of it.
Mhm. The
Yeah.
other thing I really use, some technology too for that goes beyond what we have listed here is I teach high level questioning. I teach level 1, level 2, level 3 questioning.
Hmm.
That again just brings up a rigor and brings up a connection that goes beyond the who, what, when, where type of questions that they tend to ask when we start this annotation. But then I, again, set a purpose for their questioning. And so sometimes like level 2 questions are those things that have to go beyond the text, but it's still in the text that we have to infer. Again, great for the history classroom
Yeah.
and the cause and effects of things happening that might not be listed. That's a big thing. And I teach them how to question on that. And then level 3 questions are questions that go outside of that text. And so how does this apply to the world? And
Yeah.
so one of the things that sometimes when students are learning questioning, that can be really beneficial, we can use technology to help us generate level 1, level 2, well, not really level 1, we already have that one, but level 2, level 3 questions, so they can really start to understand what those are like and to give a model. Because I just came from the place, we never can pull out of a kid's brain if something we haven't put in there. So if we haven't
Mm.
modeled that and we haven't mentored that, they don't have anything to really rely on for that. So we use that as a mentor and I call it a thinking partner.
Yeah, I love that. I think that this really is a nice transition to the second task the second strategy we want to talk about, which is writing strategies. Because even the way that you're talking about those analysis questions, you know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
You're talking about, and I think that this is also going to hit so many different topics within the high school curriculum that writing is everywhere. Once we understand what we've read, then just like you said, we have to pull that out of the student's brain in
Mhm.
some format, and that's always writing.
Yeah.
And so the strategy that we want to talk about is the thesis, which I know I could talk about thesis statements and maybe some
All
people
day.
like until I'm blue in the face. But would you talk to us a little bit about a thesis and why this is such a profound writing strategy?
Right. And again, it kind of again is connected to that reading strategy. So our thesis is just really our roadmap to our paper and whatever we're writing. And so one of the things like we can use when, especially if we're reading non-fictional text, again, really great in the history classroom, is understanding what the main claim of the author is, or what their thesis is, because that's what it is. And so we have some model theses, but it also keeps their writing on target. So if we haven't paid attention to that little thesis statement, their essay could go from a potential A essay down to an F because it's such a mess. So really directing and targeting that to be able to do that. And again, coming back to those questions and what kind of questions do we want to answer, and those higher level questions, in my experience, has tended to lead to a more robust thesis statement that allows them to really, go beyond the very simple thesis, but taking even younger students, middle schoolers, to a higher level. And then again, of course, increasing that rigor as they're in high school, moving to that college level. But I just as you have college kids on your roster, I mean, we're still
Mhm.
struggling with thesis statements. And
Yeah.
so if we can get that handled in high school, they are at a huge advantage when they get to college and are able to just take that on and triumphantly. So that's important.
It is important because I mean, just like you said, if we get that locked down in high school, we do better on those important standardized tests.
Yep.
We do better on all of the AP. I also have students on my roster with educational connections who are in IB programs in high
Yep.
school. Very, very writing focused. And I know, like, for those programs too, they will have oral exams where they have like one card where they can write down a couple points that they can bring up. And one thing that I always coach for those students is let's get a thesis statement.
Yes.
So we're talking about this a lot, and some folks in here might be like, "Ah, yes, the thesis, I know it well." In case there's anybody who doesn't, a thesis is the main idea of a piece of writing, whether it's a paragraph, a long paper. Many times in high school, students will encounter the three-part, or what's often called the tri-fold thesis. That is one long sentence with three parts, and the three parts of the thesis fit with the three body paragraphs of the traditional five-paragraph essay. I don't know if that thing that I just said from memory proves that I'm a literature teacher or or that, or if I'm just that big of a nerd. But this is so important for every type of writing. And the motivator here, because, the strategy is great, but if it doesn't help to motivate the student, what's it even doing,
Right.
So the motivator here is that blank page paralysis. I mean, have you ever encountered that, Sarah? Like the kid that's
Yes.
just maybe in a session with you and that cursor is blinking and you can just see them kind of like melting down?
Yes, I call it
Yeah.
analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
They're just, they're in this perfection place where where they've analyzed it to death and have no idea. And that's where we usually like we'll start doing like a brain dump. Padlet's great for that because I
Mm,
don't know if some of you might not be familiar with Padlet, but we start a brainstorm and we just start kind of mind mapping every kind of like a brain dump. What do you know about this topic? Let's just get it out there. And then you can actually separate it on the Padlet for each of the things that we're wanting to talk about, and then you're going to form that three-pronged thesis out of
yeah.
it because then you're going to brain dump in a very organized manner
Mhm.
those things that you know about each of those things to be able to just come up with a very strong thesis. That
Yeah.
has worked really, really well for me.
One of the things that I do in my sessions with students, whether they're in high school, college, I have some middle schoolers, I take dictation.
Mhm.
So I say to the student, okay, we're not going to stare at that blank screen. I want you to talk to me. So like, I just did this with a student who is doing a paper for AP Environmental Science on endemic species. And so I said, okay, let's talk about this. Name some endemic species. And I learned this the other day. These are species that only exist in a tiny part of the world. And the best example is that little salamander, the axolotl.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
it's only from this one tiny place geographically.
Uh-huh. Or
And so
Minecraft.
Oh my, they're in a lot of video games nowadays. They're getting
Yeah.
out there. Yeah. So my students started talking to me about endemic species, defined it in their own words, named some, started to talk about what they learned in class. And as they were talking, I took
Mhm.
dictation. And then,
Mhm.
of course, in the session, I can show them, look at all you know.
Yes.
I literally typed up your words. This is actually something for your favorite high schooler you
Mhm.
could do together.
Mhm.
Where and it's hard at first because you kind of want to coach them like, oh, but remember that thing. Don't
Mhm.
forget that. But the magic is in when they are talking, they are writing through their speaking, and you are just taking it down and letting them like compose. And then you can flip that screen around and show them, kid, you just wrote 250 words, 400 words.
Right.
And this is so our tech assist for this one, there is a it's you can get an account with a Gmail address. It's called Otter AI. And it is text to speech that will then summarize what you say into like action items or talking points. And it is a great little tech tool that can help with the writing process. And before we move away from this one into our next topic, I want to address a question. So Glory asked, so basically we just try to find the thesis for every text that we read. Glory, I love that thinking. So when you read, you do look for the main ideas, but also when we write, we want to encourage all of our high schoolers to write with a main idea in mind, not just like a stream of consciousness, and not necessarily like the writing has to be perfect in any way, but that you have to have that main idea.
Mhm.
And once you get that main idea, honestly, it puts words on the page, and now we're removing that like analysis paralysis that Sarah talked about. Have you
Mhm.
ever done that, Sarah, like the dictation strategy
All the time,
with
all the
writing? Yeah.
time. Yep. And then showing them how to organize because, of course, again, modeling, I'm really big about modeling. So I'll
Mhm.
model that Padlet piece and then set them up for success in between our sessions. So it's something that they can go back to and kind of work on those things. But that's huge. And a lot of our students are ADHD. So that is a struggle to kind of multitask and do those things. And then
Yeah.
they really get stuck. But when they do that and they see success, it's amazing.
Yeah. So we've covered getting the information from the text. We've covered when we're going to write about it. Now let's talk about reviewing because, studying when students are in high school, this is a big deal. This is when you start to have, these are the tests that are for all the marbles. We're not just doing, times tables and spelling words anymore.
I wish.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know as an educator is that, when students are engaged in class, they are retaining 60 to 70% of what they learn from their class, what they practice in their homework, but it's like targeting those unknowns. Would you
Mhm.
talk to us a little bit about that, Sarah? Like, how do we really figure out the stuff that the kid knows from what they don't know when studying?
Yes. My favorite strategy is something we call the stoplight study strategy, where we're really training kids to go ahead and color code their stuff. So what generally happens is when it comes time for studying without a student having all the strategies and all the tools in their tool belt, and they'll go study everything. So when you ask a student, well, how are you going to study? What is your approach? They're like, well,
Yeah.
I'm going to reread all the slides. Well, we just talked about all of that. Okay, we need some
Mhm.
annotating, we need some writing. Well, let's bring in the annotation right here into our information. So we're going to prioritize because we're going to take all the stuff that as we read through it. You're not just going to read the slides, but now you're going to make your own copy and you're going to highlight red, which you have no idea what's on that slide. You're going to highlight in the red.
Mhm.
The yellow's like, well, you kind of maybe heard about that and might know a little something. We're going to yellow that. And then there's always the green stuff that they're good to go and they could probably teach it. But what
Right.
I found, Rachel, and you probably similar, is that students will do that and then they're like, they spend all their time in the green stuff, right? Because they feel
Yes.
success there. So it's
Hmm.
really like teaching them, and then we're going to chunk them. And this is where the executive function piece comes in, where then we're going to start to make goals on how to make some of our reds yellows and some of our yellows greens until
Hmm.
everything is green. So what I've also seen with this, going back to our less time on task, is one, they know more than they think. I mean, that's usually the case. And so when they think that they're overwhelmed and they're going to study everything, procrastination sets in.
Yeah.
And so then then we're at then we're getting into our phones and all the things and anything to avoid studying. But once they see that, oh heck, yeah, I know some things here, they have a confidence. And again, it's very motivating for them to
Yeah.
have that. And then again, making those goals, and this is where our checking in and things like that, and make goals to and celebrate when those things have moved and we no longer have any more red on our study notes and we're getting them to green. So
Yeah.
that's huge for me.
Yeah, it is. I want to show everybody what this looks like. So these are actually two that I've done with students in my sessions. On the left-hand side is from a college level um, astronomy class, and on the right-hand side is English vocab from I think like 10th or 11th grade. And so I'm also going to talk about a tech assist here because you can see that One of these is a definitely a cell phone photo, and the other one is a PDF. I annotated these with my student using my iPad. So this is a big tech assist. A
Mhm.
stoplight study guide is something that you can do with your favorite high school student. And believe me, you don't even have to, in this day and age of the tech assist, like actually color code on their notes. When I work with students in sessions, I will ask them, like, take a picture of it with your phone, send it to me. I put it in my iPad and I ask them the questions. Like,
Mhm.
define liquidated for me. We're one, let's highlight that one yellow. This is a great way for, wait, can everybody hear me? Can
Yeah,
you hear
you're
me,
back
Sarah?
now. It was glitching just a little bit, a little
Okay,
bit.
I got a little
Yes,
thing on
it cut
my,
you out.
okay. I'll
You might want
hopefully
to
it
recap
didn't.
that. Yeah.
I really hope it glitched with me like doing something weird with my face. Okay. That's always my favorite. So when you use the stoplight study guide, you can use this paired and you can use a tech assist with it. So I know
Mhm.
like I have students where, we do this in sessions, but then they do it with their mom or dad. They take a
Mhm.
picture with the iPad, highlighting with the finger, and then they have a way to set up their study their study apparatus.
Mhm.
And I mean there's other things that we can put in with this. Like one of the things that I always use in conjunction with the stoplight study guide, like I definitely use things like Quizlet, Khan
Mhm.
Academy. These are also great tech assists. Do you have any other studying tech assists, Sarah?
Although I use the same ones. Yep. For the, especially getting red to yellow or yellow to green, we get more stuff. And sometimes it's just that good old rote memory that's where Quizlet is great and makes those online flashcards, because we have to learn the quote unquote grammar or vocabulary of,
Hmm.
a topic that we're on. So if we don't have that academic language, so to speak, so we always start there to make sure that that is all understood. And Quizlet is fantastic for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Quizlet. There's another one that some of my college kids use called Anki, Anki, where at that level they can. I have one student that makes lists of terms in Excel, and then he can export them to Anki. That's Anki, and then actually add in pictures and stuff. Like he's taking advanced French classes,
Wow,
and
that's
yeah.
new.
I mean, and I know there's probably somebody in our webinar today who's kid has taken like AP Mandarin,
Yes.
AP Italian, you know what I mean? So all of these types of things, these are great assists for skills that we already have.
Mhm.
Another thing that we have to keep in mind when we are working with studying
Mhm.
is how to study. And this is something that's so difficult for students because of course I encounter this all the time with my high schoolers where they're like, I just got to stay up all night.
Yeah. No.
Like they've seen it in a movie.
Yep.
And so that has to be what works. So would
Yeah.
you talk to us a little bit about spaced practice, Sarah?
Yes, of course. Like, first off, they need sleep. That's when the short
Yeah.
term goes to the long term memory dump. So we've got to get them to sleep. But the other part is they can only retain so much at a time, and so practicing again, helping them like when we start with the stoplight studying, and then we start chunking and saying, okay, we're going to do this many items to get to here. We're not
Hmm.
trying to do all of them overnight. Like we have to
Right.
back up, and again, this is where we're backing up as soon as a big unit test is coming or whatever. We're constantly looking at those things and revising where we're at with all of those things all the time, because we want to consistently be reviewing, so it's not this cram session in the end, that they are sleeping and getting the rest that they need to be able to
Yeah.
function with their brain in the right spot and be as successful as possible. The other part is we all know that cramming, that we lose it as soon as the quiz is over. And so honestly, what I'm seeing too, the transition from high school to college, some of that can be okay if you're not taking those AP classes. Now, AP classes obviously are meant to function like a college class. And so they build. And so those quizzes are going to turn into finals in the
Yeah,
end. And so if we're just cramming to pass the quiz, we've actually shot ourselves in the foot, so to speak, because then we're going to what, cram for a lot more rather than
hmm,
just taking the time and doing the hard work up front. And it's really, again, we've already reduced the time on task. We've already chunked it. It's
yeah,
not as overwhelming as we all think. It's just sitting down and doing it. So
yeah,
that is so important. And then you're going to see, then when they go and take their finals and it's like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Well, yes, because you're actually put all of that short term into long term all along the way.
right.
So that's big.
Yeah, I mean, and so whenever I talk to students, I mean, and this is something I do all the time in my sessions with students, we're always making a study plan.
Yes.
And I always liken studying to physical exercise,
Yep.
where I say to kids, okay, if you did leg day twice in a row, what would happen? And I get some version of you get noodle legs. It's the same thing with studying.
Mhm.
You end up getting noodle brain. You're
Mhm.
cramming and cramming. You're going hard. And you can't discern the things that you know from the things that you don't know. And earlier, Sarah, you were talking about turning those reds to yellows and those yellows to greens. Spaced practice means that we set up a study day and we actually take a break. This doesn't
Yep.
mean that you're sitting around eating bonbons, not doing
Right.
anything. A lot of times when I make a study plan with students, it's like, okay, here's your test. So you're going to study the day before. You're going to take a break from that subject, that studying subject, the day before that. What else are we putting in there?
Mhm.
Maybe that's when we're doing our vocab for another class, or
Mhm.
that's the day that we're catching up with our reading.
Mhm.
And that's also the day where, when we have our mind off of the studying task, we can start to see, oh, okay, so I went through my vocab words again, and I am still missing the word reprieve. But now I've remembered the definition of semblance.
Mhm.
Now you can review the study materials that you've set up, and you can say, oh, these are the ones I'm still missing. These are the ones that I need to do.
Mhm.
And of course, like a tech assist that I always use in my sessions with students is, once we make a study plan, I often encourage them to, like, if they're an iCal or a Google Calendar user, I
Mhm.
encourage them put in details about that. Now, I will say this, not everybody wants to use a digital calendar.
Mhm.
But if that's something that works for you, you're
Mhm.
taking something you already use and now you're using it as a tech assist for studying. Do you have any tech assists that you like for studying practices?
Well, just to kind of add on to this, I have students that actually won't use a Google Calendar or the iCal, but they actually use their Canvas to put in
Yeah,
their own stuff, which because then it's all in one place and all of
yeah.
their stuff's already in there. And quite a few students that I have spoke with and have taught over the years had no idea that Canvas had their own ability to like put that
Yeah.
in. So, we're always looking for that tech assist that they already have access to. But Rachel,
Hmm.
I just want to answer. There's a question here about Quizlet and sciences,
Oh,
math, and about the equations that it's taking too long to put in there. I absolutely hear what you're saying, Joy. What you can do is there's been so many Quizlets already created. You
oh
can
yeah.
actually do a search and see if there is something already created that someone has already done all of that with to be able to do that. It's Canvas, like that's their learning management system, not
Yeah.
Canva.
Yeah,
So it's
Canva.
Canvas that I was talking about, Karen.
Yeah, and it's hard. That one's really hard too, because like kids use, I think too, another one that maybe others people use. There's Canvas, there's Schoology, and there's Google Classroom. Those are like our major learning management systems. Canva is often something that kids have the ability to use through the school to make like infographics, slide decks. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a really good question, Karen, that you put Canvas or Canva. I'm sorry I interrupted you there, because I love
Okay.
that idea about customizing a Quizlet.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it just, I mean, don't reinvent the wheel. That's what I always
Yeah.
tell students. You don't have to do all this, but I don't, because again, and Joy, it feels like just from your message, you probably have been there like, well,
Yeah.
this took forever. I'm never doing this again. I totally get it. but go see what someone else has done. And sometimes you can even put in the name of your textbook and the chapter that you're looking for.
Hmm.
Now, this comes with a caution. You do need to check their work because
Yeah.
sometimes it's not accurate.
But that's a study skill in and of
Right.
itself.
That's exactly
You
right. But
know,
you can make your own copies and then, fix whichever
yeah.
you need to do.
I mean, you get something. Don't trust those bozos on the internet,
That's
you
right.
know.
That's right.
Check it over, see if it works for you. Yeah, I mean, these are all wonderful things. Like I also the last time I was working on an academic task, which was in 2022, I was using Quizlet. And one feature that I really loved was I could take a picture and
Mhm.
then Quizlet would like read the text from the textbook. Like I had a list of like all these vocab words, and then I could create the cards from the picture.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and that was functionality that I had on my phone and on my tablet, which was really nice because you're just kind of manipulating things with a finger.
Yeah.
And the process of cleaning all of that up,
Mhm.
it was like I was of course rereading every word,
Mhm.
making sure that the camera caught all of the letters so nothing was misspelled. And then I had my Quizlet that like really worked for me and helped me with that learning task.
Mhm. But to your point, you'd already done some of that studying just in the creation of that.
Yeah. So one of the things with studying though, like I know I am very guilty of this. I am guilty of the digital distraction. This is actually the number one question my high schoolers ask me in sessions. Is there anything you can do to help me with the distractions that my phone causes? So we have three apps here that help reduce digital distractions. Now I gotta say, Sarah, I use all of these. Do you have any experience with these? Do you want to talk about any of these?
Well, I will tell you that again, back to when we were talking about this is what happens when kids get overwhelmed. This is where they go. This is
Yeah.
their way to avoid, to do kind of work avoidance. And so this is where it becomes really important for something like this to be done. Also, parents of high school students, you also have parent controls that I would love to like encourage you to use, that they have the ability that you can, time out their limits and things like that. And of course, the older that they get, they need to be weaned off of that. And we're not doing
Hmm.
that to the seniors in high school. But when we're talking about, the freshmen, especially, because really a freshman is just a second year, eighth grader, and not all the frontal lobes are all developed, putting these on, but also using the settings that are there, because there's also settings already in their phone that is like you can gray out their stuff at a certain time so that they
Yeah.
can't, they can't access that. And again, it's just this is discipline, right? This is, and all of us struggle with discipline on some level. And so we got to find what works, because there's another one that I have students that love, and it's called Focus. It's just called Focus, and you grow trees. And so the
Oh
more that you are
yeah.
off your phone, and it actually has a timer on there for you, so you can't get on it. That's the one I'm most familiar with.
Hmm.
And so we grow trees and we grow forests, because I'm actually from the Pacific Northwest and I'm now in Texas and I miss my trees. So
Hmm.
trees are kind of my happy place. So
That's
we grow
great.
trees on my phone.
Yeah. I got really into this during after the lockdown phase of the pandemic. Like before the lockdown phase of the pandemic, I was the curmudgeonly teacher that's like, "You darn kid, get off that phone." And then the pandemic hits and I'm like, "Oh, I understand this now because I am addicted to the Black Mirror, you know?" So I really needed something to help me with like limiting things. Opal is one that will allow you to limit or block distracting apps. I use the free version. It blocks the two apps that are most distracting to me for the majority of my day. So I am never on social media during the day. I am focused on my work. I'm focused on my family, things that I love to do. I also use one called Focus Friend. It's a gamified little app. You can see on the screen here. You get a bean. Mine is named Beatrice, and the bean wants to knit. And if you allow the bean to knit, she will give you her crafts and then you can furnish her little room. and it will lock down your phone anywhere between 15 minutes and 2 hours. Another one that my students really like is, and I started using it because my students like it. It's called Finch, and it's a kind of a virtual pet and a goal setting app. Um, and it really helps you to like check off those goals and like develop really good habits. So these are all ones. We also have an article on our website that gives more details about these. So I think we're gonna get into Q&A now, but before we do, I want to do a preview of day 2. I am going to be joined by Catherine McWilliams Klein tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about STEM success, why math and science feel so hard, but how we can help. Also, before we get into Q&A, Sarah and I are both coaches here at Educational Connections. If you are interested in learning more about executive function, coaching, tutoring, test prep, college consulting, one of the 3 wonderful professionals on this screen can help you. All you got to do is go through that QR code, email, or give us a call. So I think that we can get into some Q&A, maybe give some folks some time if you want to right now to put some questions in the chat. But Sarah, as people are asking questions for Q&A, would you tell us about like maybe the parts of like our session at Educational Connections?
Yes. So our parts always include, obviously we come in and we check in with the student, just to check in to see how they're doing and kind of what their weeks, what their highs and lows have been. Because one of the things that we actually do at Educational Connections is develop a relationship with the student, because students that feel safe with their tutor or their executive function coach are just seem to perform better. So we do that. Then we always look at their learning management system. Like Rachel was saying, that could be Canvas, that could be Schoology, that could be Google Classroom, or some other version of that. So we're going in there, we're doing that with them. We're making a study priority plan, as she spoke about, always trying to help them, keep them on track. And then we always have work time. So many times within our sessions, some of the hardest parts about is getting started. And so we look at the things, sometimes it's called we eat the frog. What is the hardest task that we know that we are going to stay away from? And we try and get started with that, with them. And then the final thing is we do a wrap up. And
Yeah.
so we do that just to check back in, what worked, what didn't work, what is our plan for next time. So that's going to be super important.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of our flow that we have each and every time we meet with the student.
Yeah. So I think we can get into Q&A. And so I'm going to look through our questions here. Oh, so one of them that came up was, what was the name of that program that helps with the dictation? It's called Otter AI, like otter, like, the little animal that holds hands in the sea and eats like oysters and stuff on its tummy. It's Otter AI, and it will take dictation. It'll summarize. I love it. I've been using it for a lot of my writing tasks. Even like the other thing about our sessions is 24 hours after the session, you get detail-rich notes from the coach that's paired with your student. I've actually been using Otter AI to give me a draft of my notes. I talk them out, and then I have, all the details that I can remember, and I'm catching them right after the session. So it's been a great writing assist for me. Okay, so we have some questions about tech. Some of these are questions about limiting things on a computer. Like I'm getting distracted on my school computer, or my high schooler is playing Roblox in the background. I gotta be real with you. I kind of always have a game open in the background, whether it's like Balatro or something. So that one, I understand that distraction. Do you know of any apps like that? I gotta say, I'm not as with it with the computer apps as I am with the phone apps. But do you know any, Sarah?
Well, I will tell you, when it is a district computer, which I think that this is what's being asked on a few of
Yeah.
them, you might have to work with their counselor at the school, because I will tell you that districts will work with you. And there are certain things that you're like, this is, sometimes again, these frontal lobes are not developed in these children. Like we get it, and the
Yeah.
ADHD and things like that. So counselors will block certain things and they can lock down their computers if it's really becoming a problem. So I would highly encourage you to reach out to their school, and to talk about that if it's seriously a problem. The other thing is very simple things, having their computer open and facing you. So if you're cooking dinner, their back is to you, so you can always see what they're doing at all times. I know we don't always want to sit around and babysit, and we want to
Yeah.
progress them on, but those are just kind of very, real things that can happen because on a district computer, unfortunately, you can't load those things because you're not a manager of the computer.
Hmm.
The other thing you can do is if you have a high tech router in your home, like that's going to you can shut some things down from a router perspective, but that's like next level beyond. You'd have to get a real techie person to kind of help you out and give you advice on that. But I do know that that works.
There's some I have a question for our audience, like are because we have like people saying like Custodio is what our school uses. You can add it to another device. We've had other people that have said like this Custodio. I don't know if I'm even pronouncing that
Mhm.
correctly. That's a new one to me. Honestly, as soon as this is over, I am looking that up. I want to know about that because if that's
Yes,
helping kids, I want to know about it so I can help kids with it.
right.
This is okay. So here's one. How do you recommend approaching teens with these tools when they just get upset when you suggest anything? First of all, I've never had a teen just yell at me for no, and it was like, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you try it? So that doesn't sound like a teenager. My student just wants to use the easiest, least effort method of studying. So anything that takes initiative on his part is just too much. That is definitely a teenage reaction to things.
Mhm.
What do you suggest? Because I have some ideas. I can start this one. If you want to start, Sarah.
Well, I mean, the first thing, again, it's sitting down and it's how you approach a student. And sometimes it's just that parent student conversation and really connecting with what their overall goals in life are. Because when you start to connect with their future and when they start to have inspiration for their future and want to protect their future, your job becomes a lot easier because then they are wanting to do that. And sometimes, of course, then we have to go back out there. I actually have an example from a seventh grade student who was exactly all those things, wanted to rush through their work and do whatever. And his mama took him somewhere, and all of a sudden he came back and he's like, I'm going to Ivy League. I was like, okay, well, something's got to change up in here. And that boy has done a 180 because he
Yeah,
grabbed onto some inspiration and he's got some goals now that he didn't have otherwise. And so
yeah.
sometimes getting them around things and getting them into apprenticeships or getting them around people that they think of things that they want to do. We have an aviation academy out here that will get you with to be able to go, try out the piloting or go try out the maintenance piece of it and see if that's something. And then they gather and grab a hold of something, your job becomes easier. But as she
Yeah.
said, this is kind of typical of what we're seeing because they're still developing, trying to figure life out.
Yeah, I encounter that resistance a lot. I actually had a session last night with a student who um just there are things that this kid is not motivated to do.
Mhm.
And so, saying like, the logical things that we know are right, like, hey, let's work on this together or let's get this done. Well, I don't have to do this until, and this student has actually calculated the last day that they can turn in the work for credit. So
Mhm.
the teacher, like this kid knows the ins and outs of each teacher's grade policies. Well, this teacher will let me turn it in 2 weeks late. This teacher will let me turn it in 3 weeks late. So whenever I work with this student, because that's the path of least resistance, we don't have
Mhm.
to think about it, I am always like, okay, you're not motivated to do the work, but darn it, what are you motivated to do?
Right.
So very recently, because this was last night, I was like, yeah, you're right. That's very true. You do not have to do this until the 21st of November, but riddle me this. What day of the week is that? And what is happening the next week? And there it was Thanksgiving break.
Mhm.
I said, so you mean to tell me you want to work on this right before pie season? You know? And so because we all want our kids to be motivated by academics. We want them to be motivated by the future. But sometimes, darn it, get them motivated by the here and now because we can
That's right.
baby step them to the next
That's
part.
right.
We can say so, and that's this particular student. It was so like in this session, it was like, well, you know what? What if I got one done right now? And in my head, I'm like, you little nerd, I got you to go there, you know?
Right.
In
Right.
so we worked together for an hour. That's our session. This student got two things done and got the third started. And these things
Wow.
are not due until November 21st. And
Wow.
so the motivation doesn't have to be some high-minded thing. It can just be in
Right.
the here and now. It can be, what do
Absolutely.
you want to do this weekend? Or how do you want to get out of that? Like you say your science teacher is a jamoke. Let's get out of that class with an A or a B. You know,
Mhm.
let's tap into some motivation in the here and now. And it doesn't have to be something massive, but even small motivators can get them to have these great results. You know,
Mhm.
so I mean, I think having this dual pronged thing, because I also have students, Sarah, where when they started talking to me about college, when they
Mhm.
started talking to me about their future career, now it's like, well, I got to buckle down now.
Mhm.
But then for other kids, it's like, don't you want a weekend where you're just going to wear sweatpants and eat pie? Like, you
Right.
don't want to think about history class then,
Right.
you know? So I don't know. I think that these kind of things can work. So I don't know if we have, I think we've got like all the questions. I gotta say too, these heroes in the chat right now telling us about this Questodio and all these other like options. For people that had some questions about computer apps, check out the chat because we got some real heroes that are
Yep. Mhm.
that are giving out the tips.
Mhm.
I can't wait to try these out myself and help my students with them. So
And you know, technology is coming so fast, and what I'm
yeah,
seeing in districts is they're trying to
yeah.
keep up with it too, and they're trying to vet stuff, and new stuff is coming out all the time. I would definitely stay close to your district. Ask these questions, especially when it's district laptops, as to
Hmm.
what you can and can't do, because every district and every state is very, very different.
Yeah, I love that idea too because honestly, you can talk to the district and get the student's laptop really focused on work.
Mhm.
And then it can be, you know, the work machine and then, you know, maybe the personal computer is what you use
Yeah.
to play Roblox or Balatro or whatever, you know.
And then have all those great apps already on it.
Yeah. So I don't think we have any more questions. I think that we actually covered all of them. So I want to just say one more time, day two, that is tomorrow. We are focusing on STEM success and why math and science feel hard, but we're also going to talk about how to help with that. So we hope to see you there. Thank you so much for being here tonight. All of your amazing questions, suggestions. What a lovely little community we had for day one of the high school playbook. I mean,
Yes.
you know, I gotta say, the group that's in day two, they got a lot to live up to. Cause
They do. And also just to mention, there's some router suggestions up in here with the
yeah,
techie people that are smarter than us. So check that out because I know that
yeah.
this is a thing.
Oh my God, the day one crowd. Big shoes
Yes.
to fill.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, and we hope to see you tomorrow.